It's good to see you. And the topic today is creating a marketing budget. Now, this is a question I get quite often. And I think for the people who were at the workshop with the chamber, that was actually one of the questions that came up, and that kind of spurred us on to put together a quick webinar with some ideas around how to put together a budget for a small business or organization, because there seems to be a fair bit of confusion around that. So a few housekeeping rules. So if I see everybody has their microphones pretty much switched off, so and that's great. If you have a question during the presentation, by all means, you can either put it in the chat box, and Katie, I'll introduce Katie here. Katie is our content strategist, and she will moderate that chat box, and make sure that if you have any questions, they get answered. So as the questions come up, feel free to put them in the chat box, or get our attention and actually open up your microphone. Like we want to make this as interactive as possible online, because it's a lot easier to stay engaged if you have some, if we're actually answering the questions that you may have, instead of just droning on with the information. So hopefully I can count on your collaboration with that. I would really appreciate it. It makes it a lot more focused for us, right? Because again, I know your time is valuable. So some of the things everybody can see my screen all right? Give me the thumbs up. Perfect. So yeah, what we're gonna do this afternoon, we're gonna first of all kind of establish, okay, what is a marketing budget, right? What's all included? Why do you need one? We work with a lot of different clients, and this is one area that's probably overlooked in a lot of cases. The big question, how much should you spend on marketing and advertising? That's a question that we get a lot, and it's not the easiest question to answer, but hopefully by the end of this afternoon, you have a little bit better idea of what you could look at and how that compares to people in, all other small businesses, other organizations. I do see a few not-for-profits in this room, right? So although maybe some of your for-profit businesses are not for profit either, I don't know, but hopefully not. But it's the same thing. Oftentimes for not-for-profit, you have to put together budgets, right? You work with budgets, you work with boards, so the numbers really matter. I want to talk about a few mistakes to avoid when you put together something like this. Just things that I've observed and seen over the years. If you can learn from this, not to make the same mistakes, then that would hopefully helpful. And then at the end, we'll have actually a tool that we use for some of our clients and internally to actually put together a like a simple marketing budget. Okay, and it'll be in the spreadsheet that's available to you if you request that after the meeting. Okay. And again, if you have any questions so far, by all means, just chime in there. So my question to you is, and you can raise your hand or put something in the chat box, is do you have a good handle on how much money you are spending on your marketing and advertising at this point? You can just raise your hand so I can see it, or not. Or put something in the chat box. So from the response, I am assuming that not many of you have a defined marketing budget, and well, some people do. Okay, Don, you have one. That's great, but don't feel bad about it. It's fairly common for businesses and organizations to actually run without a set marketing budget, and yeah, so you have a smaller budget, of course, because you are not for profit, right? So, and your budget kind of becomes a plan as well, right? So yeah, that's perfect. So you're in good company. I think we've all struggled with the same thing. So over the next 30 minutes or so, I want to walk you through a few ideas that I have around marketing budgets and some of the best practices around that. And then after that, we definitely have more time for Q&A as well. So. Okay, Katie, anything in the chat box that I need to address before I move on?
Just everyone just kind of contributing to the question in regards to whether you have a marketing budget in place. So it looks like there's kind of been a mixture of responses.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, and that's great. So thanks for participating in that. So, what is a marketing budget? Let's first talk about that in fairly briefly. What is all included in a typical marketing budget? Well, again, this is kind of our opinion or my opinion on some of these things. So do with it what you want, but overall, I think it's fair to say that your marketing budget should include your website. For a lot of businesses, their main point of contact and the main point where most of the conversions take place still. When you talk about client conversions to or prospects becoming clients, oftentimes that happens on the website. So it's really important to have a rock solid website. Search engine optimization. So you have a website now, you want to make sure that it can be found online, right? That takes time. That's an effort. And all these things, either you do them yourself or you farm them out. But regardless, your time is worth money as well. So you need to take all these things into account. So social media can definitely be an area of that's taking a lot of your time, right? Would that be a fair statement to say that creating content is time consuming? I see some people nodding and some people responding to that, and that's true, right? But your time is not free, generally speaking, right? You're not volunteering, although you may be volunteering in some capacity, but normally speaking, in a business setting, your hours, if you're working on content for social media, you're not working on other things, right? So there's a cost to it. Blog posts and content that's in the same vein, right? Like if you are blogging or if you're creating content for your audience, it just takes time, right? So you need to take it into consideration. Then we have the more traditional, maybe the advertising, like print advertising, radio advertising. In this area, TV advertising is almost out of the question, right? We don't have a good local TV station anymore, but radio is still pretty big around Central Alberta. And online, of course, like the paid advertising on Google and Facebook, for example. Email marketing is another aspect that a lot of businesses or a lot of our clients are still successfully using just to connect with their clients. And I'll in the next slide, I'll kind of give you an overview of that as well. Your printing, like your printed materials, your signage, for example, it all cost money, right? And then also the implementation of all these things, right? Like who's managing your the implementation of your digital marketing. So all these things should be, in my opinion, part of when you do a calculation and actually make an honest assessment of how much time and money you're spending on your marketing. All these things should be included. So in other words, there's a ton of options, and this is kind of like the way Edge looks at the world, and again, these are 7 steps that we believe 7 areas that every small business should pay attention to, and very similar to the list that I just showed you, right? From the website to the content to all the way to some of the paid online advertising options. All these things need to be addressed, or at least need to be looked at and make sure if they make sense to you. And in the middle of this diagram is kind of like the strategy, so your plan for all these things, right? And then when it comes to your budget, that's very much related to your marketing strategy. As we will see in a few slides here, the strategy and what you want to achieve is really kind of driving the amount of money you need to invest in your marketing, right? Does that make sense? So what are some of the advantages of putting together a formal budget? Like even if you don't have a board, even if you just work by yourself, why does it make sense to put together some of these numbers so you have something to work with? Well, there is a fairly famous quote that's been used like over the years, and I had to kind of look up who actually came up with this, and that I thought it was some kind of an advertising executive that had coined this phrase, but it was actually a person called John Wanamaker, and he was a American business person and a pioneer in marketing. He was one of the first people to really seriously look at what advertising and marketing could do for his company. So his quote was like, "Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half." So I'm not sure if that resonates with anybody, but I think that's how a lot of people look at their advertising and marketing. It's kind of this black hole that they look at. They know it costs them money, but they don't always know what the results are, right? So that is the main problem, I think, when it comes to your marketing budget. You don't have a good handle on that. Anything in the chat box there, Katie, that I need to address?
Yeah, Don's comment kind of definitely ties into this quote that you're referencing right now. It's one of the reasons why to have a marketing budget is to measure return on investment. And Patrick also says you can not agree to everything offered nowadays as well.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, so thanks for those comments. Okay, so that's I think that's kind of just the way a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations looking at marketing. It's kind of this black hole that they don't know exactly how it works. So hopefully with some of the information that we will share this afternoon, it'll become a bit more clear what you can do with that. So we know we want more sales, like more of or more awareness, or whatever your goals are. But another famous quote, and this came from the former IBM CEO Thomas Watson, like nothing happens until someone sells something. In other words, we all know we need to advertise and market our products, because if we don't sell our product or service, we can have the best service in the world, but if nobody knows about it, it is not going to be it's not going to help us very much, right? So again, so the problem is we don't know exactly how it works, what works and what doesn't work, but we do know we need it. Okay, so that's kind of those two combined are some strong reasons, I think, to start looking at these things, at putting together a budget and start to be more focused where you invest your marketing dollars. There's really too many options available out there right now, I think, when it comes to marketing. Like I like to say, marketing used to be simple, right? You just put an ad in the yellow pages, but nowadays we have, and then some of you can't relate to the yellow pages, I know, but some of you do. But nowadays, if you want to promote your product or service, there's so many different areas that you should be looking at, right? So again, it's the problem that I see with a lot of organizations, they engage in what we call like random acts of marketing. Okay, so there is the radio salesperson calls and go like, hey, you got to do some radio ads. Another agency calls and say, hey, you got to do some Google ads. Somebody else calls you, you need to work, you go all in on social media. It's a very confusing area. And if you can kind of make sense of this, and by just planning some really basic stuff, and make sure that you focus on the 20% of all these things that you can be doing, that will give you 80% of the results. And that's what I've seen work really well. If you can narrow it down to some of the things that work for you, you're in a much better position to understand where you should invest your marketing dollars. So again, going back to the circle diagram that I showed you, like if you start with the strategy and with the plan, the areas that make sense for you to invest marketing dollars in will become more obvious right away. And now, instead of just going all over the place, you're focusing your efforts, because you have only a limited budget, right? Like who has for my own sake, like who has an unlimited marketing and advertising budget in this room? Nobody does. Amazing, right? So you need to be very, I think in this, especially with all these different options, you need to be very, very cautious and making sure that you're focusing on the right things, okay, when you put these things together. So, we have established, I think, that it is important to have a budget. It is important to really have a strategy to kind of figure out what that budget should be. But we haven't really talked about yet, like, okay, like tell me now, like, am I spending enough on my marketing? Like if I talk to my board, for example, there's some people in the room here that have boards to account to, or even to your own, shareholders. Maybe I'm not sure if there's any shareholder companies here, but you need to somehow justify the numbers that you put together and justify the work you're doing, right? If you are working in marketing for your company. So the big question is how much do I need to spend on marketing? So again, there's several things that kind of influence that the answer to that question. Okay. There's several things to consider when it comes to establishing your budget. Okay, so the first one is your growth goals. Like if you are in a situation that you really want to grow your company really fast, you probably will have to invest more in marketing and advertising than compared to if you just want to stay with the status quo, right? And not every business or not every organization has the goals to grow. In some cases, it's a lifestyle choice. So keeping that in mind, that like what you want to achieve with your company will definitely influence how much money you need to invest in marketing. Okay, so that's kind of the growth of the company and your objectives. The other, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so that's a very good starting point, right? And it's kind of makes sense, I think. The second factor that influences is if your customers are either other businesses, like we call that the business to business, or if your customers are actually consumers. So, your business sells to consumers. I mean, there's a big difference there as well. So if you sell to businesses, generally speaking, you're kind of working in a niche, or you have better information who your ideal clients are. And it's a little bit easier to reach them, generally speaking, right? Because they belong to a certain trade organization, they read certain magazines, or they go to certain websites. Plus, the other thing with business to business is, of course, generally speaking, the transaction value, like the cost of your product or service, is higher. So you need fewer clients to actually be profitable and to grow your business. Whereas if you sell your product to the end consumer, generally speaking, the amounts, of course, are smaller. So you need more consumers, more smaller amounts to actually to grow your business. Okay, so and with that, you have to invest more money in your marketing and advertising. And the third thing is, how established are you? So if you've been around for a long time, you have a good reputation in the market, you have a strong list of clients already, you're gonna, in some ways you can throttle down your advertising and marketing activities a little bit, because you have a steady stream of people that are either repeat clients or you have a great reputation, so you get a lot of referrals. Whereas if you're a brand new company, and we talked to quite a few, startups, you basically have nothing, right? Like you have an idea, you have a product or service, but you don't have any, you don't have a following. Nobody knows about you, right? So you're going to have to invest a little bit more in your marketing. Now, that is oftentimes a big problem that I see in startups. They don't think twice about spending hundreds of thousands or thousands or even millions of dollars on their infrastructure, on their equipment, their buildings. But when it comes to the marketing, there always seems to be a lack of funds for that. And that's very unfortunate, because if you want to do it the right way, and again, a lot of startups, they know this, but in some cases they don't. They like marketing and advertising is always an afterthought. So that's another thing that you need to keep in mind, right? If you do make a budget for a product launch or for a business, make sure that you put enough money aside for the initial marketing. And of course, once you build up business and you get customers and you can actually, you start to get that cash flow, then you can, of course, throttle that down as well. The fourth thing is, if you're an existing business, you've been around for a long time, you're adding a new product or service, of course, it's going to take some effort to get that new product and service in front of enough people, so it makes it your worthwhile. Okay. Just to check up here for a minute, any questions of anything that I've discussed so far? Okay, so now, how can we now establish? Okay, we talked about a lot of general observations and things that we need to think about, but is there a way you can kind of compare what you're spending on marketing right now to where other businesses in your industry actually, what are they spending on their marketing, right? So I always like a rule of thumb, which is not perfect, but it's definitely it's something to consider, I guess. So this information comes from the Business Development Bank of Canada. They've done extensive research on this, and they in line with what you just said about if you're selling to consumers or you're selling to business, it's slightly different. But a business to business company should expect to be spending between 2 and 5% of their gross revenue, so your total sales, right? And then these are averages all across Canada. Okay, so there's always exceptions and differences. And then if you're in the if you have a consumer as a client, then it actually jumps up quite significantly to 5 to 10%, right? And I think that makes sense. Like, I think if you look at all the large consumer companies, for example, that sell directly to consumers, their advertising budgets are generally speaking, significant, right? Whereas in the business to business, you can definitely, if you're very focused with what you do, you can get away with a smaller investment. So hopefully that's, like, I'm not sure, you may not even know exactly what you're spending on your marketing right now, but this is something you could kind of compare that with, right? And when I share this information with some people, they're shocked, because they go like, well, that seems like a tremendous amount of money that we need to spend on getting the work. But it's just the alternative is that your competitors are spending money on their advertising. So in order for you to stand out and to really compete with that, you need to be willing to to dedicate some of your proceeds of your business back into marketing. And if you do that and you do it the right way, you're gonna definitely see results. Okay. Anything in the chat box here? Don, I like your comment about measuring of the return on investment, and that's actually okay.
Yeah, Jean was just wondering how this could apply, this rule of thumb rule could be applied to a not-for-profit.
Yeah, exactly, right. So a non-for-profit has a lot of similarities with business, right? But of course, there's also a lot of differences. So this research, this rule of thumb is definitely more geared towards to the businesses, like the for-profit organizations. I could try to find out some information about not-for-profits, but I think I'm expecting to be very little information available. One source we could look at for you, or you could look at yourself, is some of the large charities, for example, right? And again, depending on what kind of not-for-profit you are, but a lot of not-for-profit organizations are raising funds, right? You could look at what some of the large charities are actually, like the Red Cross, for example, what they would spend on it's actually on their financial statements. And in some cases, they've been criticized for it because people feel it's too high. But I think the reality is like the large organizations that collect a lot of money from donors, they have one thing in common: they take their marketing very seriously. They're very good at marketing, and they are willing, and they know they have to reinvest some of these because it's all donated money, of course, but they understand they need to donate, or they need to reinvest some in that to get more more donors on board, right? So a very good question. I can't really answer it, but I hopefully that helps. Okay. Yeah, so here we get to Don's point. Okay, like you need to measure your return on investment when you set these budgets as well, right? So return on investment is basically made up out of two different components, or at least two components. Is the cost of acquisition. So how much money does it actually do I need to spend to get a new client? And we all know that getting a new client is always more difficult than getting like selling something to an existing client, right? But that's a whole different discussion. Like basically the rule of thumb there is like it's 5 times more expensive to get a new client than it is to service an existing client. So I just threw together this, okay, and then the other component is the lifetime value of a new client. And that's another aspect that's oftentimes overlooked. When we look at our marketing spend, like the money we're spending on marketing and advertising, we can't always just think about this is just a one-time deal. We're selling this person or this company, like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like I hope your business is such that people have repeat business, right? In a lot of cases, those are the best businesses, the people that come back over and over again, people that already know and trust you, right? So you don't have to spend a lot of advertising dollars to convince them to work with you. So that's the lifetime value of a new client. So I just took a random example, and this is just theoretical, I suppose, but it was actually based on some research as well. And there's no dentist on this call, so I think I can safely use this as an example. But we all know that dentists are not cheap, right? So it costs money. So in this case, acquisition costs, all the costs that were included in this marketing spend, like all the categories that we discussed earlier, compared to divided by the new clients that this company acquired, the cost for each new client came to about $250. Okay, so that seems like a lot of money. But if you look at what the return on this one client is, in this case, like roughly $22,000 over a lifetime of this client, because we tend to, don't switch dentists very often. So if you look at it at your advertising spend in light of the lifetime value, now all of a sudden, in this case, it's a really good, like over $14,000 return on investment. Now, of course, this is a very simplified kind of an example, but I want to just make the point that look at it from a long-term perspective, and it's not just as you build your customer base, these customers are your most valuable assets, and for you to spend money to acquire those clients and then get referrals, get repeat business from them is extremely valuable. Okay, I'm just gonna pause here for just a brief moment, just check in on everybody, and if you feel free to unmute if you have a question or a comment at this point. Katie, you have any additional thoughts of what we discussed so far?
Yeah, so just kind of going back to the very beginning, I think, as Peter kind of said, having a strategy is definitely a beneficial first step in creating a marketing budget. Those random acts of marketing can really blow up your budget, even if you do have one in place. So by starting with the strategy before you create a budget, it's definitely going to help kind of maintain that budget throughout the kind of course of the year, or however long you have that budget established for.
Okay, thanks for that. Like, were there any surprises when it came to like those numbers that that we threw out about those percentages?
I just have a question in the chat here, Peter.
Okay.
How do you find that proof on return when there isn't really a way to prove if a new client found the business through social or if you spend ad dollars just on social?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, right? And so the good news is with before digital existed, there was absolutely no way to measure any of your results, right? Like you would throw money at newspaper ads or radio. And again, of course, when I say there was no way to measure, it was just more difficult to measure, right? Because it's not, it was not digitally trackable. So the good news is there's definitely a lot of information, and Jenna, I think you know this probably better than I do. Like there's lots of ways a lot of metrics that come from your advertising on, if you pay for advertising, for example, there's a lot of metrics that become available. The thing though is you're absolutely right. There's not always just one way of converting your clients into or prospects into clients, right? So that's still a bit of the missing link between the what people are doing online. And that's why like we feel that if if part of your business is actually to generate more leads to go to your website. Now on your website, there's, for example, there's easy ways to measure success, right? They can either download a piece of information, they can contact you. Those are all what we call in the marketing world conversions. It does not necessarily mean that they are going to buy from you, but there's baby steps that they take to actually get to know, like, and trust you, right? So there's definitely it's not a foolproof system, but now at least like on social, it's really great in like the engagement level of people. There is social is definitely one of the more challenging platforms or channels, I believe, to really measure success, right? Because it's such people are just looking at you, but you don't know exactly what their intents are. Whereas if with, for example, with Google advertising, and I know some of you are involved in this, it's actually very measurable, and people, they type in a certain search phrase. They're looking for a retirement home in Lacombe, for example. They're very specifically, they have a very high intent to find that information, whereas social is more the relation building and the interaction.
I just have another question in the chat here. Is it possible to have more information or an example of a strategy?
Okay. Yeah, so we have a like a process that we help our clients through, and we call the strategy first process. We're just doing one for a client right now. So we and we can make this information available for you. It's on our website. So it looks at the ideal clients for these for you, right? You got to help me out here, Katie, because since you've been working on that. But we look at the when it comes to your strategy, we look at everything. Okay. So we look at your current online presence. So all the different channels that you're on, your website. Are there any technical issues? Can we make recommendations how your website is structured, for example? We look at at your audience, right? And we call them ideal clients. So we try to make descriptions of ideal clients. And then we make them into personas. So we actually personify those people. So you really know who you're talking to when you put things out on social or on your website or in any other of your communication. Then we work on what we call a core marketing message. Okay, so that's like in a nutshell, really what is the problem you're solving, or why do you exist? And based on some of did I miss any? I probably missed a few components.
Yeah, so as Peter said, we kind of take a detailed look at your complete online presence, whether it's your social media, your website, Google My Business. We look at your SEO, so your search engine optimization. Sometimes that's kind of a mouthful to say. And we also look at what your competitors are doing online in the same kind of realm of looking at just kind of comparing what's working for them, what isn't working for them, and just kind of seeing what will work best for you as well. And yeah, so we look at your messaging, your personas, either good or bad, so people you want to target and who you do not want to target. And then also kind of what platforms will work best for you as well, and just kind of based on where your ideal clients are kind of most active online as well.
Yeah, so really, it's really the strategy. Your strategy really comes down to, like with all these different channels and options available, based on your audience and the message that will resonate with your audience. What are the best tools to the most obvious tools that you should think of using instead of just randomly, do all these things or try to do all these things. It's much better to just focus on one or two things. And even I think going back to social media, what I've seen the most successful social media, uh, the companies that use social media extensively, they're they're very good at maybe one or two channels, but you don't see them jump on all the channels, right? And then that's kind of one of those lack of strategy just by just jumping on the latest tactic. And that's the same for if all you're doing is Google Ads, for example, that's not really the right way to approach it either. So hopefully that explains it a little bit. So we have a process in place that we use with our clients, and it's a real, we got like what comes out of it's the marketing action plan, and that's instead of just having a large document with, I'm not sure if any of you has ever made a marketing plan, but most of them are pretty boring. Most of them are way too long. They're kind of a pie in the sky kind of a thing, and nobody's ever looked at them again, right? They collect dust on the shelf or sit in the drawer somewhere. So I think the best thing you can do is just be very practical about these things and have at the end of that analysis, so to speak, make educated choices how you what areas of your marketing you're going to focus on, and start there first. And there's always more you can do, but that's more or less limited by your time and your budget. Okay, so again, hopefully that was a helpful explanation. Okay, there was one more question there, I think, on the chat that I didn't tackle yet, from the Lacombe Museum.
Yeah, so they've been working on the clarifying your message workshop, and they've struggled a bit with the ideal client and in regards to the empathy section. Do you have any ideas or recommendations on working through it?
Mm-hmm. Well, right back at you, Katie. That's kind of your area.
Yeah, so it's a little bit hard just because a lot of businesses or organizations, they kind of are, I don't want to say self-centered, but they often think of their own point of view. So it's a little difficult to be putting yourself in your customers or your members' shoes. But that's just something you want to do just to kind of get an idea of what they need, what their problem is. So that also kind of ties in your empathy section. So by understanding what the problem is, you can say, we understand, we too have gone through the same experiences that you have. By creating an empathy statement, you can create a connection with your customers through that. So again, it's a little difficult kind of changing your mindset from kind of your organization to what your customers are thinking of. So just try to put yourself in your customer's shoes, think about what their problem is, and then just kind of apply it in kind of, oh, we understand, we too kind of setting. So I kind of hope that helps a bit.
I think the thanks, Katie. I think the empathy thing is really important because nobody likes to get sold to. A lot of your clients want to know for sure that you understand them, right? You understand what their problem is. You understand what the conversation that goes on in their heads, and if you can figure that out, you can basically you can break down so many different barriers, and that creates a tremendous amount of trust. And even if you even admitting in some cases that you're human and you're not just a corporate entity, like Katie said, right? Like we love to talk about who we are and how good we are, but really in essence people are not looking for that. So that empathy part is really really important, I think, in marketing these days, that you come up with a very clear message that resonates, and people in your target audience go like, hey, they raise their hand and say, hey, that's for me, I'm really intrigued. And other people may say, well, that's not relevant to me, so they just move on, right? And that's okay too. You can't serve everybody, so that serves two purposes. Yeah, Gene, like the good question. So yeah, there is a section on our website that talks about it. We have some additional information. If you're interested, by all means, get in touch with us. Yeah. There's also some options to go to these strategy sessions yourself. So same with the clarifying your message, right? We've offered this workshop for free. There's also since we didn't done that, there's also other options we have available, not on our website yet. But we belong to a like a marketing consulting network, and they have resources. And one of the marketing or the strategy first process is part of that as well. So there's two options you have. You can either work to it yourself, or you can have it done for you, like have us facilitate that discussion, right? So good questions. Okay, so we have a few more minutes left here. So I'm just going to talk about a couple mistakes again from my experience that I've seen that I want you to be aware of. You know, we already talked to this about this fairly significantly, right? If you don't have a strategy, you don't have a plan, it's almost becomes impossible to put together a marketing budget, right? Because the marketing budget is basically how are you going to implement your strategy. So again, a lot of these random acts of marketing are really what they are a lack of strategy. Okay, so if you and strategy doesn't have to be complicated, in our opinion. It is really the strategy is probably already in your head. It just needs a framework. It needs a way to kind of put these ideas and thoughts on paper. And even by the fact that you're actually starting to write things down and talk it over, it's amazing what that does to your thought process. Okay, so that's definitely if you don't have a strategy, I guess, then it's really difficult to put the dollars towards it. Okay, I think that makes a lot of sense. So then another. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
Peter. Don just had a question. He's working with a new startup. He was just wondering how would marketing for them differ from an established business?
Yeah, like good question, Don. Like so, like a new startup is actually really a perfect situation because you start on a clean slate. They don't have any baggage, they don't have any history, they don't have any bad things they've done, right? So you can kind of help them do things right from the start. So when it comes to their marketing messaging, for example, right, you don't have you're not dealing with a lot of history or things that people already have done. But I think it's extremely important to with the new company to go to the process and to create a strategy for them and with them, right? So it's really important to get the buy-in from the owners as well. But it's really not that different, except for, of course, you have no clients, right? And that's one recommendation I would have for any startup is to get at, even if your product and service is not perfect, and even your website is not perfect, even if your letterhead is not perfect, you don't have a logo. I mean, those are all important things, but if at all possible, if you can have a like a sample product or service, and even that may not be perfect, if you can actually present it and actually sell it to somebody, you're going to learn so much about about the exact problem you're solving. You're going to learn so much about what your messaging should be. You're going to learn so much about what your ideal client looks like, right? So I think the process is the same. Although like your competitors, right? Like there's always competitors out there, so you can take that. Like, yeah, the one component about like where you're at right now in your online visibility, of course, you wouldn't have anything to report on that, right? And that's okay. But all the other aspects are the same for an existing company or a startup company.
And then Jenna was wondering if we have examples of creating a strategy.
Well, we would have to. We can set, like, again, if you go to that link that Katie shared, that kind of gets you some very basic information. If you want to have like we have some, I think we have a sheet available as well that we can send you about the like what's all included and what the steps are. Okay.
Yeah, I can share that link again there, Jenna.
Yeah. So those are just a few different options that you would have to kind of go through that. And again, you could either you could hire us to do that, but you don't have to. You can also just do that work yourself. And we have a few tools now available that you can actually go to that yourself. The problem though with a lot of these things are, I always compare it to, I just got a haircut yesterday, so I hope you like it. But I always compare it to, you can do everything yourself, right? You can cut your own hair, you can build your own house, you can fix your own car. But the reality is a lot of small business owners are very busy already, and they just don't have the time or expertise to do it, right? So that's kind of the like the problem that you're dealing with. So we definitely can make some of the information available. We look at strategy different than a lot of other marketing companies, just so you know. And I've taught marketing at the Donald School of Business and at Berman here in town. What basically what we teach them in school, I'm not really proud of it, works really well for Nike or Coca-Cola, all these concepts. So what we have done, we've actually taken an approach to make it very practical for smaller organizations, because let's face it, 99% of business are small businesses, right? And when I say small, it doesn't have to be just a one-person business. Like even a business with 10 or 20 or 50 employees is still considered a small business, right? So there's different principle. There's a different approach needed to do strategy for those companies, and I think we have a really strong framework to do that. So we make it available to you to do with whatever you want to. Okay, we're not hoarding that information. It's just kind of our point of view, and even if you don't deal with us, that's not a big deal. That's not the point of the educational goals that we have for you, right? We want you to be successful. Okay, Kate, there's another something else in the chat box, I think.
Yeah. Corey says, in the way of marketing, if competitor X is saying advertising via radio, should you be trying to match with a radio ad of your own, or go in a different direction via social media, etc.?
Excellent question. That brings me to the next slide here. Perfect. One of the mistakes that I see a lot of organizations make, they do exactly that. They get all excited about, our competitors are on radio, our competitors are on all these different platforms. Instead, I think it's much better to again go back to your plan, and again a very simple plan. Like go back to what your goals are. Go back to like who is your audience, who are your ideal clients, and where do they hang out? Like don't get so much. And I know it's hard, right? Because we get emotional about competition sometimes, but that's probably like a huge mistake, because like what if they're going in the wrong direction themselves, right? So now we're imitating bad ideas, and that's only going to make things worse. So I think instead of just reacting, I think you should start planning and just really try to figure out like who are your audience, who is your audience, how do you get a hold of them, and what is the message that would resonate with them? Like what is the problem or pain point that your organization is solving for them? So your idea of doing something different, I like that, right? But don't just be different to be different. Be different because you have a plan, and there's a reason why you think social media works better for your marketing campaign compared to radio. Hopefully that answers your question somewhat. Because so the other thing is with the imitating of other companies, oftentimes we try to imitate those really large companies, right? Like Nike or Coca-Cola or Red Bull, that actually their advertising budgets are in the billions. Okay, so there's absolutely no way that you can compete with them. So be creative and be original, and stick with your plan. Instead of just doing what everybody else is doing. And that's the same, I think, for social media, with all respect, right? There's so many different options for you. If you want to go on all these different platforms, you better have a good reason to do it, because we've already talked about, the amount of time it takes to do all that, right? So, and it's okay to spend the time on it, but you want to make sure that you get some return on that. So be very, very careful that you just don't get swept away in the latest marketing tactics, so to speak. But really start thinking it through and say, hey, like this is actually really working for me, and then start building on that, keep building on that. So thanks for that question. We talked about this, of course, like if you don't measure the results, you don't know what's working and what's not working. Although, and we already talked about this as well, it's not a perfect system in digital. You have a ton more information than you would have from compared to the times from Yellow Pages, for example, right? Like how many people have seen your ad or clicked your page or have engaged with your brand. So if you don't measure, then you don't know what works and what doesn't work, right? So then you don't really know what like what kind of a numbers to put in towards those different tactics. And the last mistake, I think, is just underestimating the value of your own time, right? Like some of these things are free, so to speak, quote unquote, but your time is not, right? So if you want to have a realistic idea of your overall marketing budget and the time you need to spend on this, you need to take all those things in consideration, I think. And so either you do that work yourself or you hire somebody to do it. There's a cost involved in that, and you need to account for that. So if you don't start doing that and thinking that through, you're never going to have a like an accurate picture of your overall marketing budget.
Don just has another question here. Are you aware of any current government funding programs available to assist in growth marketing initiatives, such as have existed in the past via Export Canada, Access Prosperity, CCAB?
Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, thanks for that, Don. Like, there's actually, I'm not sure you may have heard about the digital, like the Canada Digital Improvement Grant that was announced a couple, like last year already, and then finally starting to be rolled out. The funny thing is, like, there's money available in the program for doing like a innovation plans or technology plans, like how you can digitize your business and maybe use software tools or make improvements to your process. But there's actually no money for what I think small businesses need most, and then it's help with marketing their business. So I'm not aware of any programs, although there's tons of programs out there. There was a program earlier during COVID that helped actually with the like your digital digital strategy, for example, but never talked about the actually implementing a marketing strategy or actually using some of those funds for digital marketing, which I find a little bit interesting. But if anybody else in the group has ideas around that you know of a program or funding available for some of the things that we were talking about, we'd love to hear from you. There's definitely like there's money available, but oftentimes it's very there's strings attached almost always, right? You need to do the work in certain areas, and personally I sometimes feel that some of these government grants are not really used to the best of their ability just because they're focusing on the wrong thing. Like the other one is e-commerce, for example, right? There's some money available for that. Yeah, e-commerce is really growing. It's really important. But even if I look around this room here, I know for a fact that a lot of you, e-commerce is not really on your radar because that's not how your product is being purchased, right? Like Patrick, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong here, but and just put you on the spot here. So Patrick does epoxy garage flooring as for one thing, right? But yeah, people, like e-commerce, like people don't go to a website. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe prove me wrong, please. But people generally don't go to a website and just click a button and go like, yeah, do my like put epoxy on my garage floor. Is that correct, Patrick?
No, I don't think it is.
Yeah, so like that's not really how your sales process works, right? So that, and then again,
I think people research first online.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you Google my business, your ranking is okay. They might contact you, and then the next step is contact the customer and visit them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, thanks for sharing that. So, and that's another thing that I found, like almost in all cases with small businesses we work with, converting people that come to your door to your phone or email, if you follow up with them properly, your success rates are through the roof. Right? But it's the biggest challenge is to get people to your door, get people to your email, get people to your website, and actually, so you have a chance to interact with them, right? And I think that's right now is the biggest challenge in marketing. Is just like, how do you exactly do that? Like, which channels are you using, and what works and what doesn't work? So hopefully that answered the question a little bit. We have a couple more minutes, so I'm just going to make you aware of this. This is the marketing budget worksheet that we have available to share. If you're interested, just send us an email. It's a Google sheet, or it can also be used in Excel, I'm sure. And basically, it covers everything we talked about, but more in and actually putting numbers on these things, right? And I find it always extremely interesting once you actually start dividing some of these things up. And I know it's pretty small on the screen, so but it gives you an opportunity to plan ahead for the next 3 months or a year even, right? To kind of get a better grasp on what your marketing budget should be. And so even for a startup, this could be very useful, right? Like if you look for funding, if you look for how this all fits together, this should be part of your financial statements, in my opinion, right? And even the company or the bank that finances you should pay attention to these things. So anyway, this is it's been very good talking to you. Yeah, thanks for joining us. And yeah, hopefully we'll talk to you either online or in person one of these days.